Hello, my haunted friends, and welcome to Foxfire Paranormal. AJ. My friends and I thought it would be fun to convene with the spirits pretty much daily one summer. We'd break out a homemade ouija board to see how goofy we could get. Because it gets too hot to do a thing in the summer, we had to find things to keep our 14 and 15-year-old selves entertained in my friend's, Jennifer, tiny little house in the 90s. Things went from casual and believable, I'm a teenager who died in a house fire, or I'm a woman who died of natural causes, to disturbing. I've never had a body, but I am able to experience life down here if you accept me. For those, we'd always take our hands off the board and demand a new spirit. After what was essentially auditioning them, the gang and I managed to settle on a rather gentle entity who went by the name of AJ Duke. AJ said we could talk to him pretty much whenever we wanted. He was 8 years old and didn't want to cross over because he liked watching people go about their lives, and he's been doing this for hundreds of years. Sounded like BS, but whatever. It's a Ouija board. All of it was kind of BS, right? It was all well and good for about a week or so. He would tell us things about other people in the neighborhood and his usual bad spelling, and it was always hot tea. We were so polite back and forth with thank you and you're so adorable. Cringe, I know. And we'd occasionally bring up AJ and jokes and casual banter when we weren't playing. He was kind of like a fourth wheel a few days there. Then it got weird. AJ revealed that our playing had attracted bad spirits onto the property. He said we shouldn't talk as much anymore, but if we asked for him when we started, he would try to take up the space so they couldn't talk to us. We felt so protected by this little dude, corny as it sounds. AJ was always around and game to talk when we sat down to gab. Soon though, we started noticing the thing getting faster and stronger. Our arms would feel pulled this way and that, and the letters would go and with incredibly skillful precision. Increasingly, we'd end up putting the board away because the vibe started to feel super sour in the room. It's gross to say, but the gentle aspect that we liked about the spirit was replaced with wording that was not only better spelled, but sexual and catty in nature. And even though we'd put the thing away once it got weird, we'd go right back to it later in the evening or the next day. It was a compulsion. One night, Jennifer's older sister stopped by to visit their mom, but decided to hang out with us for a while. It was literally the first time she ever did this, and it felt really cool to have someone who was pretty popular in high school kick it with us. When she came into Jennifer's room and saw the Ouija board, she got instantly piqued. We showed her what we usually got up to, and she was skeptical at first. She said, "I'm gonna go in the hall and hold up some fingers. Let's see if the Ouija board can get it." And so she does, and one by one, it kept nailing it. You could see the smirk wipe off her face and into something akin to fear. Then you could see the fear go into a desperate curiosity. She sat down and played with us, getting some gossip about her parents' divorce that we didn't even think to ask about. It didn't take long for the sexual, catty stuff to get cranked up. She was also looking at us with a face that also felt the air shift. When we did our usual bellyache and hands-off ritual over it, she protested. She thought this was when it gets really interesting. And what did that thing suggest we do not 5 minutes after we decide she might be right? It suggested we hold a seance. The gang went along with it because cool big sis got us super excited at the idea. The board told us to get into a circle and hold hands, then call for a spirit to appear. Mind you, the Ouija board wasn't spelling things out cleanly. It'd be something like circle, hold hand, invite. We do as we were instructed. Nothing was happening at first in spite of Big Sister's insistence that, if you're out there, show us a sign, on repeat. Still, our big round eyes would look around at one another. I'm not sure if we were hoping something would happen, or if we were all waiting for another to call it off. But ultimately, no one wants to be the nerd. If we played our cards right, we might can hang out with her crew as they smoked cigarettes between classes and generally looked beautiful and badass. "If you're there, do something," she commanded. A newspaper clipping taped to my friend's mirror flickered, and we all jumped. But she confirmed that the ceiling fan was on, and this was something it did periodically. There was maybe another minute of Big Sister making demands, and I was certain someone was going to speak up and break the circle. But Big Sis dropped, "If you are here, I give you permission to show yourself." Not a moment after she uttered those words did she leap off her feet and scream while pulling her shirt off. "Get off me!" she was screaming, and Jennifer immediately hopped up and pulled the cord on the light to turn it back on. Her big sister threw herself back first into the wall, as though smashing an invisible something that was on her. I remember a single stream of spit hanging from her mouth as it hung open for a moment. It was really odd to see such a cool person looking decisively not, but I digress. It was terrifying. She spun around and screamed, "What is it?" over and over. And just below her bra strap were 3 scratches, some places deep enough to draw a bit of blood. We instinctively huddled around her, cloaking her in a protective shield, but had no clue what to do except move that huddle downstairs and into the living room where her mom was watching TV. She leapt up and took a look at Big Sis's back as we frantically explained. "Y'all, it said AJ. The scratches said AJ in welt and blood." Her mom made us burn the Ouija board. She kept saying, "I told you not to mess with it. I told you." And in rare fashion, Jennifer didn't utter a word in protest. She just asked for advice on the best way to burn it. It was a strange bonding experience, standing in the backyard at night watching her mother, usually quite sullen and withdrawn those days, put one arm around Big Sis and use the other to continuously douse the doomed board with lighter fluid. I never did get to stand outside with the cool kids. If anything, she pretended not to see us even harder. First, a bit of background. When my wife was young, her parents and siblings lived with one set of her grandparents. Her grandfather was murdered in the home. It happened in his bedroom upstairs. The room was used primarily as storage for the next 20 plus years. Her parents tried to sell the house multiple times, but living in a small town, everyone knew and the house would not sell. So they stayed. Years later, and while my wife and I were engaged, there was a murder trial in which I attended in support of her family. I saw the crime scene photos, which is important to remember for later. Another few years later, we had 2 kids. The oldest was 6 at the time. My wife's family does not like to talk about the murder, and our kids do not know about the murder to this day. My father-in-law decided he wanted the room where the murder happened to be a hangout spot for the grandkids. He put sleeping bags and a TV in the room ahead of a holiday. We didn't like it, but stayed silent since the murder was a sore subject. My father also wanted all the grandkids to sleep all together in there. We were the first to arrive, and my son went into the room alone. He usually couldn't sit still long at that age, so after a couple of hours, I decided to check in on him. During the whole conversation, he was still and rigid and would not look away from the TV. "Hey, buddy, is everything okay up here?" I asked. "Yeah." "Okay, have fun," I said. "Daddy, do I have to sleep in here? I don't want to." I asked why not. "I'm not alone." Every hair on my body stood up. "Well, yeah, I'm here with you." "No, there is someone in here with us," he said. So I asked, "Are they nice? Mean? A grown-up? A kid?" "A grown-up." "What are they doing now?" "They're watching you." I said, "You've never said anything like this at your grandparents' house before, and you've been here a lot." He told me, "They don't leave this room, and I've never been in here before." I asked him, "Where are they now?" Without looking away from the TV, he points to the far corner where his grandfather was murdered and said, "They're standing over there. They don't move much." I said, "Okay, buddy, you don't have to stay in here." And he left the room with me. Lunchtime spirit sessions. I won't go into all the details because this story would be long, but basically, in middle school, my friends and I got really into using a Ouija board at lunch. Sometimes homemade, but a friend had a real one. Usually we'd ask to speak to dead relatives and nothing bad really happened. But one day we decided to not call a specific spirit. I don't remember much of the actual session, just fear. We ended up taking our hands off without saying goodbye, and that's when the weird things started. We started seeing this figure. It was like a black, messy shadow with horns and piercing red eyes. I'd see it in my peripheral vision, but could never look at it. Then, I started seeing it in my dreams, every night. I hadn't had a black and white dream before, but every night was the same dream. It was black and white. The shadowy figure would take my eyes. I think for about 2 or 3 weeks, I'd have that dream nightly. My friends that played the Ouija board with me that day had the same dream apparently. They saw weird things. We'd get random large scratches across our backs. So one day, my friend went to speak to a psychic. The psychic apparently immediately told her that something was connected to her. We tried to do protection spells. By this point, we had stopped our daily lunchtime Ouija sessions. We were scared. But on one of the last days of school before summer break, we decided to make a homemade Ouija board and play with it at the back of the class while the class was watching videos. We tried to call whatever had been following us. We tried asking questions and the planchette kept shooting to no. We mocked it. We tried to tell the spirit we didn't believe in it. We asked for proof it was really with us. And then we heard a crash in the hallway. It was loud. It sounded like someone threw a bench down the hall or something. My 3 friends and I all heard it, but the rest of the class hadn't even looked towards it. We went out into the hallway and we immediately noticed handprints on the roof. So the hallway was about 8 feet wide. I'm not sure how long, but it stretched the length of the school. The roof was at least 9 feet high though. The tallest people in our school could brush it with their fingers across the roof if they jumped off a bench. The roof was covered in handprints, like if someone pressed their palms flat against the roof. And when I say covered, I mean it. The full 8 feet across and all the way down the hallway, there was not a bit of space that was clear of handprints. I hung out in this hallway a lot. I spent a lot of time staring at the roof for a perspective drawing assignment about a month back. The handprints weren't there before. I asked some of my other friends who hung out in the hallway daily. They were confused because they hadn't seen handprints there before. I asked one of the teachers too that I was close to. He saw them, but was confused to how they got up there since no one in the school could reach it. The next year, the handprints were still there. When I went back to the middle school in the following years to visit teachers or pick up my brother, the handprints were still there. I haven't touched a Ouija board since. Doppelganger. It was about 4 years ago. It wasn't the first paranormal occurrence to happen, just the one that scared me the most. One night, my 2.5-year-old son woke my husband and I up when he crawled into our bed. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I decided to work on a project in my craft room. I was in there for about 45 minutes when the small monitor to the nanny cams started rapidly flickering on and off. Mind you, these were not motion-censored cams, only the continuous feed. The cams are in the living room and our son's room. I went over to the monitor and picked it up. It all of a sudden made a loud, ear-piercing sound like a mic feedback. It startled me and I dropped the monitor face down. I noticed the glow around the edges had stopped flickering. I picked up the monitor and turned to look at the screen. I saw my son standing still as a statue in the middle of the living room staring at the wall. I started for the door with the monitor still in my hand. When I glanced down again, my son's head turned, only the head, and his eyes went directly into the camera in the upper corner of the room. He had no expression on his face at all. I left the room and went through the small kitchen and dining room, rounded the corner to the living room, and it was empty. The door to our bedroom was on the other side. I went in there and my son was sound asleep, in the same position he was in when I left. my husband looked up from his e-reader. I asked him if he had woken up and gone into the living room. He told me no. I asked if my husband had gotten up to go to the bathroom or kitchen, thinking maybe he just didn't see our son try to follow him. But my husband swears he hadn't left the bed at all. Like I said, this wasn't the first time we had seen doppelgangers, but it was always so brief that you didn't really have time to get scared or have it completely register yet. This was different. It wasn't just a glimpse. Above all, it was the look on my son's face, that empty, void stare, when he turned his head to face the camera. Even still, typing it now gives me chills. The scream. I was walking home one night from my grandmother's house. We lived in a village in rural Ireland. Granny's house was on the outskirts of the village, so I had to walk up a narrow country lane to get to Granny's house and back down the lane to get toward the village. My granddad was dying, and the priest gave him his last rites. He pulled through the night, and my granny told me to go home and get a bit of rest. I reluctantly agreed and walked home down the country lane that I've walked on ever since I was a boy. Only this time, it seemed weird in some way. Almost eerie. And I never get spooked. I pushed the feeling to the side as my mind was in shock about Granddad. I was walking toward the bottom of the lane when I noticed a blur of white next to one of the farmer's gates to the field beside my grandparents' house. I thought it was a lamb that escaped. I walked towards it to investigate. When I walked towards the white blur, it felt like electricity entered every inch of my body. The hair was standing up on my arms and what was left on top of my head. I stood frozen in perpetual fear. The figure was an old hunched woman in a white robe, and she just screamed the most merciful scream. The guttural scream was so frightening, I actually stopped breathing due to sheer fear. I looked up into her face and saw nothing, just a blur. The cry was ungodly, like a mother finding out her child is dead. The scariest scream I have ever witnessed. Adrenaline must have kicked in, because I legged it straight back up the lane toward Granny's house and legged it in the front door. I could hear Granny rushing out of Granddad's room crying. She said, "Granddad's gone." I imagine he'd passed away within 5 minutes of me leaving and encountering the woman on the lane. I remember telling my elderly aunt and a few of my family members about the woman, and they said that she was a family friend by now. She only appears when someone is going to die. I thought they were taking the piss until my father, a born skeptic and very religious man, confirmed the woman's existence. In some families in Ireland, she would have been called the Banshee. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content. You can support me on Ko-Fi and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I also have a website where you can send in topics and videos that you want me to cover. I'll leave the links to these in the description. Let me know your thoughts on these stories and share any experiences that you have had. Stay haunted, and I'll see you in the next video.